I think no one in American literature looked at the wound of slavery and the violence it took to form the United States quite like Toni Morrison. And she did that across time and space, and so she was writing about slavery in its time in novels like Beloved. She was writing about its aftermath in novels like Jazz, when there's the northward migration to Harlem. She's writing about the start of the prison industrial complex in novels like Song of Solomon. And Song of Solomon was Barack Obama's favorite book, and you can see in the story of the character of that milkman search for himself. Toni Morrison wrote about African Americans as if their dignity pre-existed. She wasn't ennobling them. She was writing about them as fully fledged characters, and that's very different
from what went before, indeed, what she saw and felt. Now, you mentioned Barack Obama's favourite of her works, but what would your favourite book be and why?
I think it's also Song of Solomon, because it's such a magical realist tour through life in the United States around the turn of late 1960s, early 70s, when there were competing movements for how America should get along. And Milkman is being twisted to one side by basically the equivalent of Malcolm X and figures like that, and black nationalists. And on the other side, he has to kind of find his way without a family. And I think it's such a beautiful book, and it still sings today.
Indeed. Toni Morrison, known, of course, for breaking down all those boundaries, addressing taboo topics, but also for her way with words. Do you find that she had a unique style comparable to anyone?
Yeah, more than anyone, I think, in the last century, she picked up where William Faulkner left off, and that the way that she tells a story is so deep, entrenched in the time and place that she sets them. She was also a great teller of love stories, about families that were entangled with each other, about characters who were in love with people they really shouldn't love, whether it's wanting to have blue eyes if you're African American, or whether it's her novel Love, where there's a number of women all in love with this man who really doesn't treat them very well, but they're enraptured with him. And I think Morrison was able to allow Americans negative capability, as in that strange capacity to want contradictory things. And she did that with our history, and she also did it with how people dealt with each other on a day-to-day basis as friends, family members, and lovers.
Indeed, what a legacy she leaves, Mr. Freeman. Thanks so much for giving us your thoughts on herself and indeed her works. Mr. John Freeman there, editor at Freeman's, giving us his take on Toni Morrison, who passed away this week at the age of 88.